Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Running4Soles podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is you're listening and whenever it is that you are listening in. Hopefully out there tackling some big run today or just some big effort like my guest today, Meg Landymore. I reached out to Meg after I saw a post she'd written post Georgia Jewel. Meg actually won the female division of the 50 miler at the Georgia Jewel, came in second overall. I was a little bit impressed by her 9-hour and 45-minute 50 miler, considering my 37 miles took 13 and a half hours. So that was the starting point. But Meg wrote this Facebook post after her run, and we're going to talk about that in the interview, so I won't go too much in there. But this post captured my heart in a lot of ways. It went a little bit deeper into this runner's life. I had followed her as a runner from sort of a stalking distance for quite a while. But this post, and you'll hear it, it unveiled a little bit of humanity that I just connected with it. So I had to reach out to her and ask, hey, any way I could interview you? And I never guessed that she would, one, say yes, although, I thought that was possible. But she said yes, and we can do this tomorrow. So all of a sudden, we're on. And to my surprise, I found out when I interviewed her, she was actually out of town the night before she was taking on a big running challenge that we'll actually talk about in this interview as well. So before I talk way too much, I'm just going to get right over to this awesome conversation I had with elite runner Meg Landymore, and I think after you listen to this, you'll find out even more of an elite person. I've really grown to really like her and everything she stands for. So here is my conversation with Meg Landymore. I want to welcome Meg Landymore to the show. So welcome, Meg.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, so I have followed you from somewhat of a distance for, a couple of years now, ever since I got into this crazy ultra running world, and that's sort of your world too, and you're really good at it. So I always try to follow and learn from the folks who seem to know what they're doing. But I've been following your ultra journey and trying to learn and trying to get better. Most recently, we shared a journey at the Georgia Jewel, and just as a comparison to talk about the Georgia Jewel, so I ran 37 miles that day in about 13 and a half hours. You ran 50 miles, and I think I wrote down 9 hours and 45 minutes. Is that right?
Yes.
And you actually won the female division. So congrats on that. I can't even imagine running 50 miles that fast. But afterwards, on the Georgia Jewel Facebook page, you wrote something. And from that moment, it was like I kind of quit admiring you as a runner and really started to admire this person you are. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to read what you wrote, at least the first part of it, and then we can talk about that. Is that
sure?
So you said, and your title was On Chasing Your Ghost. You said, I thought I was ready to face my prior self head on. I thought I'd prep for this race. What I didn't know was what it would actually feel like to chase myself and watch myself fade into the distance because, well, you can't chase a ghost. The feeling of losing the battle with yourself from a different time, but in the exact same place, that I was not prepared for. I wasn't prepared to be as raw as I silently spewed my reality and or excuses on the empty, dark trail. I'm a mom of two. I opened a business. I had surgery, COVID, but they fell on deaf, heightened nerve endings in the mind where the resounding, you're not even close to the athlete you were that day, reverberates through my body with every step. with every misstep and near fall, the memory of how I didn't even trip at all in the first 20 miles of the Georgia Jewel 100 in 2018. So what exactly were you talking about? I felt it, but what exactly were you talking about when you were talking about chasing this ghost out there?
So, I mean, I guess for like, I think having followed me for the last couple of years, but for those that don't, right, 2018, I had this amazing race, right, set the course record, all this, but it was just as amazing for me as it sounds, right? I mean, it just went really well. I climbed hard up the beginning. I didn't trip. I was just literally bouncing along the trail, right? Somebody, Stephen Cameron, who is a good friend, I was on his podcast and he described me. He's like, you look like a fairy bouncing down the trail. And that's how I felt. I was so lighthearted. Everything was just smooth. And so having to choose a race for this year, right, I consider doing the 100 again. And like, obviously I've been through a lot, all my excuses or reality, right? And Jenny Baker, and, she had, and even my husband, Dave, he was like, I don't think that you should do that. You're not going to be happy when you can't do better than you did. And I was like, no, I'll be fine with it. I understand what I've been through and I don't think that'll be an issue. I can handle it. And they're like, you should do a different race. So I said, fine, I'll do the 50, right? But I know the Georgia Jewel course so well. Like you remember, I mean, you don't remember every rock, but it almost feels like you do when you've been on that course enough. And how it felt. And because you start at the same times and the same sunrise, it was literally like I was running the same race, only I was working so much harder this time, right? Nothing was easy about it. Every step was hard. I tripped everywhere. And I was, I could literally picture myself in 2018. And I was just like, wow, how did I do that?
Right. So how did you ultimately then deal with that? Because I'm like thinking, I was like out there completely opposite, because my story with the Georgia Jewel was 2 years ago. I showed up at the practice run that they had. It was my first experience. I couldn't finish the practice run. Then I showed up for the race, and this was the 35 mile, and I dropped out at the halfway point. I was dying. Last year, just as some sort of aggressive redemption, I signed up for the 50 mile. I'm like, okay, I can't do 35. I'm going to go show this course. I'll do 50. And I had a lot of things happen, mainly the demons of the previous year in my life. And I didn't even show up last year. I signed up, paid, and didn't even show up. So when I came this year, like all I've got's failure in my mind I had to deal with.
Right.
Here you were battling success, and so it's like a completely, I had never even thought about how like success can be as much a demon as failure. So
yeah, and I didn't think it would be, right? I brushed it off. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to try and beat a previous time on a completely different scenario, right? My life's not the same as it was 2 years ago. Right. And yet it didn't matter on the trail, right? That gets to you. But how did I deal with it? I mean, I think in 2018, that was the first race where I had really practiced and I thrived off of positivity. So I just kept doing, what I practiced, but it was harder. I definitely struggled with it this time, but it was just shoving those thoughts aside and being like, doesn't matter. You are here right now. You're still doing fine. Just because you're 5 or 10 minutes slower than you were 2 years ago, it doesn't matter. You're running your race and that's all we're here to do, right? So just self-talk and reminding myself to be present with the race that I'm running now, and whatever I'm dealing with, that's my present situation. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. So, and you're a gifted athlete, obviously gifted runner. And so I think for many of us, it's encouraging to know that somebody of that caliber is out there fighting some of the same mental battles that, just a guy like me out there is battling. Was that a constant all day thing where you were just constantly having to remind yourself, or did you ultimately get into this group? Because again, like you were one of the top runners that day, even though you were battling the past, you ran an incredible race.
So it's interesting, right? I never meant to be a racer, right? I really enjoy ultras, and I really meant to turn out to be someone who's more of a middle of the pack and takes it easy, spends too much time at aid station. But somehow, whenever I go to races, this never happens, right? I'm in and out of aid stations. I'm very focused. I end up competitive. It happens every single time, right? So I did sort of get to a happy place with it, but I kept pushing, trying to beat my times mentally from 2018. No matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, right? I was still catching up with all the way to the bottom of Johns Mountain. But that's where I was hoping I would see that I had significant gain on people and I could relax and stop fighting so hard. And that's where I saw that I had 4 also wonderful and very fast females within, a few hundred yards of me. And I was like, oh no. So I was like, this is where I make the decision to either literally give up or do the best I can. And right, so that's when it was real, right? Like I had to decide what I wanted out of this race. Did I want to go home knowing that I just gave up on myself? Or did I want to give it my best shot? And if I got beat, well, that's fine because I gave it my best shot, right? If I didn't leave anything out there. And so that's when I made the choice. And that's where this race started to matter. Right. So when I left halfway, I decided that I was going to leave whatever I had out there. So it became a much different race.
So this success ghost that you were battling, it's clearly has its birth in this competitiveness in you, both.
Yeah.
You're competitive against others. You clearly are competitive against yourself. I'm
Yeah.
curious where that comes from. Have you ever identified like where did Meg pick that up?
I have spent a lot of time thinking about it because like I said, I don't ever want to be competitive. It just kind of happens. So I'm sure some of it's just innate, right? Like what I was born with, but I was always this little sibling, right? My brother had 6.5 years on me. So he had 6.5 years of strength and knowledge and everything. And I always wanted to best him, which I don't know if I ever have, but I can certainly run faster than he can.
Yeah.
So I think it all just kind of came from being the little sibling, but
I'd be curious, there's, you've got young kids, am I right?
yeah.
How old
Yeah.
are your kids?
Just about 6 and 2.5.
Okay, so mine are 11 and 13, but so you hear this a lot with youth athletics a lot these days, but even in the classroom and culturally, sometimes there's this idea that we're too competitive, like we shouldn't stress this competitiveness, especially in our kids. And given that you're very familiar with being competitive and the positive side of that, and maybe facing some of the demons of that, I'd be curious, with your kids in general, what your thoughts are in building a competitive culture, building competitive kids.
I think there's a thin line, but I mean, I think they should be taught to be competitive to an extent. I think a lot of athletics has gotten too far, right? I'm afraid to put my kids in athletics now because it's become just this different animal for like 8-year-olds and whatnot. Like, so I grew up doing gymnastics, right? And so you're always competing, and I have bucket loads of like participation things, and I think those are nice, but I don't think that should be the goal. So I'm definitely for some competition, but especially in athletics, I think that there's definitely some lost sight of the fun part. I've met so many parents in medicine who pushing their kids, and I don't know, it's definitely two-pronged, I guess, right? There's two different directions to go with it, and I don't know if there's a good spot in the middle.
Yeah. I guess I lean toward, I've always been competitive. I mean, and to your point, there's, and I don't think some of the things that get characterized as too competitive, I don't often see as being too competitive. I call that sort of a bad attitude. There's
Yeah.
a good attitude to compete with, and one that doesn't work so well. So
Right.
I think we can be too competitive, but I don't think some of the signs of that we identify are always being too competitive.
Agreed. It's more the pressure, like pressuring kids and stuff. The way that it's done is not correct, I don't think. But like I have a hard time. So like my almost 6-year-old, right? He is not competitive. He is not bribable. He is not. And if he doesn't want to do it, I've got nothing.
Right.
Right. Like,
Right.
won't ride a bicycle. And I literally told him, I said, I will buy you any toy you want if you get on your bicycle right now. And he's like, so that toy from the dollar store? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I don't want to ride right now. Like, he could ask me for anything and he just doesn't get it and doesn't care in the least. Right. He has no competitive spirit. Well, that's not true. Not none. Right. I'm watching it build slowly, but he's very different from me.
Yeah.
If I fail, I want to keep doing it over and over and over and over. Right. And he's like, I just can't do it. I'm like,
yeah. No, I battle that. I've got both of mine are athletic, but I'll talk about my oldest as an example. He's a very good basketball player, but when he's out there on the court, there's not an aggressive bone in his body. And I think that, one of the things I always say is, like, when you're on defense, that ball is yours. You need to act like that. He can't have that ball. That's mine. And that's just that doesn't register, that whole line of thinking, which, to your point, I think was always just sort of innate. Nobody ever taught me to be competitive like that or to see that ball as mine. It was sort of this innate thing. So anyhow, I was curious.
I've always innately put a ton of pressure on myself, to the ends of damage. But
so with running and ultra running, what do you get out of that? I mean, what is your why? Why are you out there? And you're this weekend, just to let folks know, you're out chasing a personal challenge this weekend that we'll talk about here in a little bit. You don't have to be there. Clearly it's, I said to you at a race this weekend, I'm just chasing down this goal. Yeah. What is it about running then that keeps you chasing?
I guess it's the mythical finding that breaking point, right? Seeing where we break down and what parts break down. So as part of it is almost like doing a scientific study, right? I want to see what falls apart and then if I can fix it and do better, right? How to keep the body going. So it's more of a curiosity. And then on top of that, I just feel so blessed that I get to be able to do it. I feel like that in and of itself is the reason to do it. So it's more of an exploration than anything.
What do you get out of answering that? Because it's you keep going, clearly, because along the way you have found some answers. You've thought, okay, well, I didn't think I could make it here, but now I've explored and discovered I can. What is it that what makes that valuable? I wonder, because people will listen and they'll think, well, she's crazy. Why is she looking to find out how far she can push herself or what she's capable of? What does that add to Meg as you do that?
I mean, I feel like every time that I do another race at any distance, the more experience you have, the more knowledge you have, the more you have to offer other people in any situation, right? I mean, especially in ultra running or any endurance sport, the things that we learn about ourselves cross over into everyday challenges. Learning how to, figure out nutrition and what your body works best off of goes into longevity in general. How much sleep you need or don't need, also goes into longevity and, living longer and a better life, being able to utilize your time, right? So I don't know, my overall goal has always been to help others. And that's so vague, right? And I went into medicine to do it. And it wasn't until after the Georgia Jewel 2018 where I started, people wanted to hear this story so much. And I started talking. And the more I talked about running, I was like, I really do have a lot of information, right? So I started having clients reach out. And that's when I really started coaching. I've been certified to coach for 6 years, but I never personally felt like I had anything that special to share. But then people started asking well, would you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to coach you, or I'll just talk to you. I'll just talk running all day. I have a wealth of knowledge. I don't know everything, but I'm so interested to learn, right? I just read a couple of new books and I share those with my clients. And I'm like, listen, let's try this with everything and see how you feel.
So I'm curious, if a guy like me comes to you who hasn't been coached and is fairly uncoachable, I'm curious, what's the most common thing in terms of again, somebody like me, what do they have most wrong when they come to you? What's the first thing you say, we we need to start here?
So most people who come to me, their biggest problem is that they overtrain. Almost all ultra runners don't know how to rest appropriately, including myself, right? It's taken a long time to figure it out. But they overtrain, or even if they, like a bunch of ultra runners who do a really high training period and then nothing for 6 months, then get back into it, right? Um, it's still you're really overdoing it and pushing yourself, which maybe you wouldn't be if that was your only life and you were an elite athlete and your job was to run, eat, and sleep. But most of us have full-time careers, kids, lives, and the everyday stressors, and it's honestly too much.
What gets to being too much? That's like, how would I know I'm running too much?
I mean, using things like heart rate variability, but also listening to your body. Like if you're waking up achy and sore every day, then there's work to be done, right? And it all depends how, like, everything costs money, unfortunately, but like working with specialists to continue to learn like where that pain is coming from, because there are misbalances from injuries that happened when you were in high school that continued to develop poorly, or your gait changed, or no one really taught you how to run correctly in the first place. Right. So there's just so much to be gained that can make running actually enjoyable, less painful. And because to me, there is a level of ultra running where I don't know if it's so good for us. Right. Being athletic and fit and healthy but is running 144 miles actually a good idea? Probably not. So finding that line where we get to be mobile, and have good, long, healthy lives, like that's the real goal.
Well, Meg, before I get crazy and do like Georgia Jewel, that 37 milers was my longest. So before I get crazy and want to do anything too long, please, please let me know when you identify what is unhealthy, because I don't want to do it unhealthy. And that would be a great excuse. Talking about excuses, talk to somebody like you. I am curious. One area I know I struggle with, and I just told somebody the other day, I don't know if I'll ever figure this piece out. And you said it in this post that you've figured out nutrition. What do you have to say about nutrition, and what is figuring out nutrition? What is a good nutrition plan? Or is that one person has a nutrition plan, somebody else's looks completely different? When you said I figured this out, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could figure that piece out.
So I really don't believe there's one right way for everyone to do anything, right? Everybody is an individual. Everyone's bodies are different, and how they cycle through things is different. But for me, I trained for years to eat and practiced with different food. And I did all my training runs, 20 plus miles, and everything was great. So every single race I would go, and for the first 20 plus miles, I would eat and it would be fine. But around 30 miles, I don't eat anymore. I refuse to chew. Everything that I put in my mouth, I spend a half an hour chewing and get nauseous, and I just wouldn't eat. And so, in things like 50 and 100, that doesn't really work so well, and things really start falling off, right? And I always struggled to the end, but had terrible recovery and, obviously very painful by the end of the race. And even in 2018, this amazing race I had, I barely ate after 50 miles. I think I had one milkshake down at Dry Creek. And I left with nothing. And my crew said, you better eat at John's Mountain. And I said, I will, I promise. So when I got up there, he sent me on my way with a veggie burger. I took one bite and I said, can I wrap this up? Because I promised them I'd eat, but I got to go because I wanted to get down the mountain before sunrise. Right. So I didn't eat. And then I took 2 bites of it at the aid station and didn't eat. And then got to the next aid station right back at Snake Creek. My husband made me wrap. I took 2 bites and he said, you want to walk with it? And I said, no, I'm good. And I walked away. Right. For those last 20 miles, I took in 1 gel, and I think I ended up drinking a little bit of calories because my pacer, Liz Canty, was yelling at me every 2 minutes. She's like, are you drinking? And I was like, no. She was like, drink it. Right. I mean, I was just straight up refusing. And the lower I got in calories, the more I struggled. And I've done this routine 100 times up to this point. So after that, I decided to stop trying to eat because it wasn't working. So I switched to mostly liquid calories. So I do a few of my spring energy gels, because I know, and the other thing I learned from that race is that I don't throw up. No matter how nauseous I am, I can get it down and I don't actually throw up. So that taught me a lesson about like having to just shove it in. Right. So, I do mostly the spring energy gels, and then I use Roctane, although it looks like I'm going to try Super Fuel actually for this weekend from, what's it called? Scratch. So, and then very little real food. But because I've increased my calories so much through the liquid, I'm actually able to eat real food at aid stations. Now I'm throwing in quesadillas, and I've had grilled cheese even, and other things that I never dreamt of eating. And everything works, and I'm able to run through my races. Right, this May I did a 112-mile run and was running, all the way through, which is just so cool what nutrition can do.
Right, right. No, well, I mean, I'm gonna, what you described you used to do is exactly like at I did the 37 mile at Jewel, and from the point where we turned around, I never had another thing but water, because I have a hard time even after that point having even a sugary sport drink of any kind
Yeah.
going in me. And I always struggle, and several times haven't been able to finish because of it. And it's funny because I've researched, and there'll be discussions around which sort of sport drink, and Morton is a big one a lot of people have been talking about. But then you have people say, well, if you do nutrition right, you don't even need any of that stuff if you eat all the right food. And I'm like, there's so many different schools on that. So I appreciate your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So this Super Fuel, so I've only tasted it. I haven't used it. I'm going to use it without practicing with it at all tomorrow. And it tastes like kind of like thick water. So it doesn't really have any flavor. It doesn't taste sweet, but it's got 400 calories and 16 ounces. So that might be a new winner. We'll find out tomorrow, but I'm pretty excited about it.
I am going to follow up with you to see how that exploration goes, because that's, if I can ever figure that one out, I mean, I'm not going to be running sub 10-hour 50 milers, but I might be able to finish upright, which to me is sort of my own personal goal. I am curious. So you're in Georgia, right? Where do you live?
I live in Maryland.
Yeah, so you're over here on the East Coast. You've gone to Georgia. Now, is your family with you this weekend?
No, they are not. They haven't traveled at all with COVID.
Yeah. How does that work out? What does family think about mom, this adventure ultra runner?
So my husband is very, very supportive. He continues to wish that he could be a bigger part of it, but he's usually left behind to watch the kids, right? But eventually he really enjoys pacing and looks forward to being able to pace me more in the future, because he enjoys running, but not like me. He's done the 18 at Georgia Jewel, and I keep trying to talk him into the 37, but we'll see.
He's not dying to know where his body breaks?
No, he's not. He likes to run just for the adventure, but he does enjoy getting out into the woods. So he can understand, but doesn't have any interest in doing what I do. My older son is supportive and pretty good about it, but also just doesn't understand. He still doesn't know what 100 miles is. I brought him to one race, and he was the one I did in May I did it around my own community. So he was there for most of it. And mostly he's just I would never do that. Right? So he doesn't totally get it. And my little one is now just getting to the point where he's kind of sad, right? He was just I want to go on the airplane with you. And I'm sorry. So kind of tough, but I'm excited for them in the next few years, because they'll be able to come and actually experience it, and I hope get to just spend a lot of time outside getting to meet different people.
How has running influenced or prepared you to be a mom? And you've run a long time. Has running looked different or taken on any different value now that you're a runner mom?
I mean, it's definitely changed. I used to, I've gone through phases where I've gotten to be very social with my running and did different groups. And I do miss that at times, because I almost 99% run alone. I get up before my kids get up, get it in, and I have that very limited time in my day. But I pretty much started that when I was in graduate school. So it hasn't changed that much. The overall energy in the day once you have kids is, you're just asking a lot more of yourself. So that's definitely been harder. This year with COVID has been interesting. I don't really have a great word for it. I mean, we're all, right, like you said, your kids are home. My kids have been home, and at their age, it's been full on play session for months.
Right.
Um, I think in the spring we started walking about 3 miles a day. So I tacked that onto my mileage, and so that was fun. I was like, this is the best training I've ever done. But then once I went back to work on top of it, right, it just got messier. And it's always something I'm able to maintain because it's important to me, but it's definitely been a struggle. I can't keep up with the extra components, right? Keeping up with strength training and stretching and icing and everything that you're supposed to do. So it's, choosing what you can manage. And how has it helped me be a better mom? I don't know, to be honest. I know it definitely has become part of my daily life, like taking vitamins or something. So without it, I'm just not me. And I really, really do hope that over the course of their lifetime, getting to see me do this does help my kids learn to take the time for themselves and pursue their crazy dreams, whatever they are.
I'm curious, prior to this race, I know Jenny had put out a post that was advertising or speaking to how many women were involved in this year's race. And I think, at least in the ultra world, it appears to me that more and more women are getting involved. I'm curious if you see yourself as having a role or a desire in influencing the number of women who get out and run and run ultras.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so. Because I hope that by sharing things as openly as I do, especially the struggling part, and especially all the pain issues, right? I talk about all my pelvic floor issues and everything else, because a lot of that people don't talk about. And there's a lot postpartum and with young kids that, like, you're not going to be putting down many 50 to 60 mile weeks. You're not going to be doing speed work. You're lucky if you get a half an hour and you have the energy to do that, right? But that doesn't mean you can't. It's amazing. Like, there's the perfect training plan and hitting your big back-to-back runs and everything else. But if you subtract out all the fluff to what you really have to do as a minimum to accomplish an ultra marathon, you could get that done if you have a little bit of support.
And if you were trying to sell it, this idea of running an ultra marathon to a woman specifically, what would the reason be? What would your pitch be why she would want to do this?
If she wants to run an ultra marathon at all, that would have to be something that they already had, right? I think the most reason that people in my age group, right? So let's say 25, well, post being single, so having kids, right? 26-ish to 40, there's a huge drop off in runners, right? And especially ultras, though. If they already have a passion for it, that's easy. If they have an interest, but it's usually, one, they think they don't have enough time. Two, they don't think they have enough energy. But the one that nobody like faces head on is because when you're away from your kids to do something for yourself, you feel awful the whole time. Guys too, but not as often. And usually they're better at being like, yeah, but that's dumb, right? Whereas, like, I don't do 50Ks and I don't do many marathons because I can't wrap my head around leaving my kids to go run for 30 miles when if I did it by myself, I could get up at 3 a.m. and I wouldn't miss half their day. Right. Whereas 100, it's bigger, right? I'm taking a whole weekend. It's just for mom. That's it. But I can't do a 50K. I spend the entire 50K knowing that I have to get back home and be mom the minute I get there.
Yeah.
So, right, that's my glitch, and it's weird, right? Well, I can run 100, but I can't run 50K.
Right. My guess is that's where that supportive spouse becomes pretty critical in helping you through that.
Yeah. And he would tell me, I've had the opportunity to run things, and he's like, go, take the day. You don't have to rush home. And I'm like, you say that, but the kids, right? Like, so it's hard to shut down this internal drive.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part for moms. So I think, and I'm sure dads too, just to a different extent, like I said. It's a really weird component that it's hard to face out there, right? I mean, every single day I'm like staring at the clock at the end of my run, like, can I get 10 more minutes, or am I going to miss getting him out of his crib? Because that's my favorite part, right? And is it worth it? Is it worth it to hit 10 miles instead of 9, but miss him getting out of the bed? Like, it's just him getting up. I could miss it today. But if I miss it today, it's one less day I get to have.
And I think some of that's probably healthy, especially for somebody like you who could easily go over that line of life be nothing but running, life be
Yeah.
nothing but chasing. So maybe that's a healthy voice in us that at least makes us pause and consider. I love what you said. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Is it, if I know what I'm going to miss, those steps or those meals or that good night, is it worth it? And I'm not going to attempt to answer that for
Right.
anybody, but I think it's the healthiest question probably to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. But I mean, it's funny, even like an adventure like this. I mean, I've watched like, I can't think of his last, I don't know how to say his last name, but Luke, he has the SCAR record currently, right? His documentary goes into his training and how much he puts into it. And I'm like, man, I do not train that hard.
Right, right,
Like, I just don't have that. I'm not willing to give up that time with my family at this point in my life, right?
right.
So I should be running mountain repeats and probably seeing the courses before I do them and things like that. But I'm not willing to do that. So I don't.
Yeah, and I don't, I can't imagine anybody would look down on you for that. So speaking of adventure, and I didn't even know, I just reached out to you yesterday, and I'm so
Yeah.
you're so generous with your time. I mean, I never dreamt that we could have the conversation this quick. So thank you. It's
Yeah.
very giving. And then on top of that, you said you were flying last night or traveling last night to Georgia to take on. I thought it was a race, but you're taking on a challenge. So tell us about what it is you're getting ready to take on this weekend.
Okay. So I guess about the end of August, a friend mentioned that his friend might be considering doing SCAR. That was the first I've ever heard of it. So I said, oh, cool. That sounds nice. And so I Googled it, and it's called Smokies Challenge Adventure Run. It's a 72-mile stretch of the Appalachian Trail that's known for its climbs, right? So basically it has 18,000 foot of climb in the first 40 miles or something like that. So you're climbing basically constantly, and then you drop down to the one spot where people can drive into you, and then you have 30 more miles to get to Davenport Gap. And I didn't really look at it much more, but I had mentioned it to my friend Celia, and she got so excited, and she was like, I really want to do this. So all of a sudden it was born, and I was like, well, I'll come do it with you. And then I was like, we were going to do it unsupported. So I was like, well, if we do this unsupported, how do we get back to our car? And she said, well, we could just do it twice.
Oh my God.
And I fell in love with the idea, right? I've been dying to get to do like a 200-mile race, but they're really expensive. They're very time consuming. Like, you have to be there for at least 5 days, right? Between check-in and race everything and finishing and getting home. So it's just not something I can do right now. And so I was like, I really want to do that. Right. And I think it took a couple weeks, and Celia's done the Georgia Jewel 50 miler, but she hasn't gone past 50 yet. And she's actually supposed to do her first 100 at Pinhoti this year. And, she was excited, but she was like, I'm actually maybe a little too terrified. Maybe I shouldn't be going for 144 if I've never gone above 50 miles. And I was like, I totally understand that, but I'm honestly kind of set on it, and I really want to do it. So the goal right now is that I'm going to go out and back. I'll be starting tomorrow at 6 a.m. And at the halfway point, Celia will join me for the second SCAR so she can get her SCAR in. Yeah.
That'd be so much in there. I mean, it's like only an ultra runner would
Right.
would somebody say, well, why don't we go there and then back? And then, like, not everybody's responsive. That's a great idea. What that showcases a little of your mentality. And then I'm sitting here thinking 18,000 feet of climbing in the first 40 miles. That's like 3 Georgia Jewel climbs, 3 times the climb in that same distance. So how long is it going to take you to get there? How long is it going to take you to get out? 72. You're going to leave at 6 tomorrow morning, and you're by yourself?
No, so I actually have a pacer. I have Jeremiah Lackey coming out for the first 42, and then James Young is meeting me for the second 30-mile chunk. And then Celia will do the whole way back. So I will never be alone, which is a huge bonus. We've got a couple of people coming in. Sarah Warner's doing a 9-mile hike with a bunch of climb just to get me some water and snacks at 16 miles. And then I've got someone coming, Stephen Cameron, coming out to Klingman's Dome, which is about 31 miles, to give me some stuff. So I actually have a great team, and I've got Robin, another friend who's crewing the whole thing the whole time. And time-wise, it turns out there is no documented female FKT for the double scar. So by default, I'm going for an FKT. But I didn't mean to be, and I'm not worried about it. But I've had a lot of people who think that I can do around 48 hours for the whole thing. So it would be really great if I made it to 72 in 24 hours. But I'm going to take it as it comes, and we'll see what happens. I gave myself a lot of extra time on the other end. So if this takes into Monday and ends up being 72-ish, that's okay too. We'll see.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
What is the longest race you've run?
So I did a 24-hour fundraiser run in my community, and I hit 111.77 miles. So that's the longest I've gone, and that was pretty flat.
So this is your big deal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it really is. Like, so no matter, like, even if I were to not make it or something goes wrong, it's still going to be an epic adventure. I'm still, I'm going for the experimentation. I want to know what it feels like when I've been moving that long, to see what happens with sleep deprivation, and just have an opportunity to play on the Appalachian Trail is such a treat. So I'm excited.
And have you ever gone longer than, I mean, that's what always gets me about these races is that the sleep deprivation part. So have you ever gone longer than 24 hours in a race environment without sleeping?
Not in a race environment. For work and school and things like that, I've definitely pulled off some like 30-ish hours. I've certainly never done it moving. And I'm not a sleeper, right? So I'm not someone that could like plan to sleep. So right now the plan is to just keep going. But if I need to take a couple of naps and sit on a rock, like if it gets to that point where I can literally sit down and fall asleep, then that's going to be awesome.
And did you do anything ahead of time to prepare for that piece of it? Or, I mean, did you change any sleep routines, experiment with anything other than having a 1-year-old? That can be good sleep experimentation.
No, I mean, so that's been the weirdest part. And, like I said about training, especially we just decided this the beginning of September. I couldn't really change any of my training because I had Georgia Jewel coming up. And then we literally planned it 4 weeks after Georgia Jewel so we could get it in before it got too cold. But if we did it any sooner, I wouldn't be recovered from Georgia Jewel. So, it was a very tiny time frame. So I haven't done anything with hills besides Georgia Jewel. Right. I haven't done any long training runs since Georgia Jewel. I'm like, so hopefully this goes well.
Oh, but only a crazy ultra runner thinks this is a good idea for all the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I've accomplished some pretty good things not doing, like, so Georgia Death Race, a good friend recommended that I should run at least 10,000 feet of elevation gain per week to expect to do well at Georgia Death Race. On a really good week where I live doing my typical runs, I'm lucky if I get like 2,500. Yeah. Right. If I run hill repeats on every hill in my neighborhood, I get like 400 feet in 10 miles. Like, that's nothing. So but I didn't think Georgia Death Race was that bad. I mean, it was definitely long, hard climbs, but it didn't destroy me. So, but it's just interesting, like all these recommendations. So if you were somebody who was looking at it, you would read these and think that there's no way you could possibly accomplish this. And I just think that that's just not true. And I'm hoping that I can continue to prove that not true. We'll find out tomorrow.
Well, it will be. Well, I mean, I will be interested. Now I'm really, really curious. I mean, I asked if I could talk to you really based on your Georgia Jewel post. And I'm glad we did. The whole ghost thing meant a lot to me. But now I'm like infinitely fascinated by what you're about to do this weekend, the fuel piece of it, that climb piece of it. Because after the Georgia Jewel, the first time I failed, the climbing killed me. I live in Virginia here, and like to your point, the only elevation gain I get is when I walk up the steps of our house at the end of a run. There's just nothing. Yeah. And so then I took to trying to do, we have a little amphitheater at a local park, so I took to trying to do those steps. Mm-hmm. But so this year leading into the Georgia Jewel, 37 miles, and trying to do this redemption. Somehow, not even thinking about it, I got sucked into doing this virtual race across Tennessee, and so I ended up doing
Yeah.
that and back. And so a guy
Are
who
you
had
went
never,
back too?
yes, so a guy who had never run more than 170 miles in a month was suddenly for 4 months averaging 325, which I still, I look back and say, how did I even do that? But none of that was all right here. None of it
Yeah.
had any elevation gain.
Yeah.
And so, and then when I went to Georgia, I was able to finish this time. And not, like I
You
said,
had an amazing aerobic base.
I guess, I guess that was it. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I don't have to climb. Maybe if I do a couple hundred extra miles a month, it'll make up for it. But man, I wish you luck this
Thank you.
weekend. I'm really excited for you now. Really curious to see how it goes. Now, do you have anybody that will be updating your progress, or will we just have to wait until you're done?
Probably wait, but my husband's on the text message stream, and I told him, I was like, you're welcome to post. Sometimes he does some good ones when I'm in the middle of a race and there's no documentation.
Yeah.
So he might do a couple, but it'll probably be pretty quiet overall. And I haven't decided whether or not I want to like share it as a post, or I don't know. I'm not really into the getting acknowledged part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, I'm going to reach out when you're done then to see how it went, and I'm going to acknowledge you because it's amazing to me. And these are the stories like I credit a lot to my journey. I interviewed really early on in doing this Harvey Lewis, and I just became fascinated with, and his why is a lot of just what you just talked about, just this constant wondering and about self and what I'm capable of. And I always, I ran my first marathon like 5 years ago, and I always say that in getting ready for that and running it, I always thought the big takeaway from that was going to be crossing that marathon finish line and just have this feeling of, man, what I just did. And I say I had that for a little bit, but more overwhelming was like this instantaneous curiosity of, oh my God, I just did that. What else can I do? And that suddenly wasn't about running. That was life in general. I mean, this podcast started, I started interviewing people which I never would have had the guts or the nerve to reach out and say, hey, Meg, can I interview you on a moment's notice? But it was like that helped me discover some things in myself. And I hear a lot of that in you. I heard a lot of it in Harvey. So I think you should, share your story, be more outgoing with it, because there's it impacts a lot of people. A lot of people end up wanting to have what it is you have that makes you want to go chase big things.
And that really is a huge goal of mine. I mean, we didn't get into that, and I don't want to get into that whole spectrum of how I came to find that ultra running is my one passion, right? But I went through volunteering, and I just finished up my 6 years. I still have 2 years in the IR with the National Guard, but all these things trying to figure out how to give back to people, and it ended up being posting about my running. That's the most beneficial thing that I do on a daily basis, because it gives the most back to people.
And it's funny, I interviewed Jenny Baker years ago. Actually, I interviewed her about a book she wrote, and in that conversation, she talked about being the race director of the Georgia Jewel, which is that's when I got the Georgia Jewel got put on my mind. So before I ran the Georgia Jewel the first time, I interviewed her and asked her about being a race director, and I asked her what's the most meaningful part of being a race director. And I fully anticipated I was going to get the answer of, seeing these people cross a finish line, or seeing people be better than they ever thought they could be, or just something like that. And she said two things. First, she said it's their opportunity to give back to a community and give back to people. That was the first thing. And then she said it's the chance to know that people are out there having their most vulnerable moments and most vulnerable conversations. And that got me really reflecting about, ultra running, but I just this idea of giving back, and you clearly live it because you were willing to get here with me, like I said today, and I'm really appreciative of that.
I'm so glad. I like I said, I'm happy and absolutely love to talk running and share information with anybody that has questions, right? I mean, every year on Georgia Jewel Facebook post, right, I always try to share something. I'm just like, I know the course pretty well if anyone has questions, right, but I don't want to be like obnoxious about it, but yeah. I want to be a support system for people. So
well, I've got a lot of support today, so I appreciate that, and I'll probably lean on you more, but I am definitely going to be anxious to see how this weekend goes. I wish you a lot of luck, friend.
Thank you.
Well,
appreciate it.
Go get it. And I didn't, this just registered with me, but once you get to the other end, get out. I mean, you kind of take on some pressure to finish because you've got this friend Celia who brought up this idea to begin with. So you're going to have some pressure to get her to her.
That's why we planned it that way, because at first she wanted to start with me, and I was like, how in the world am I going to turn around after 24 hours, leave you behind, and I'm supposed to want to go back? I was like, I need you to do the second half with me.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, I need to have that pressure that you're going to need to finish too. So
yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, I know you're going to finish. Now it's just a matter of how long it's going to take. So
right.
Go get them. And thanks again. And I hope we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
All right, Meg. Thanks a lot. Have a good day. Well, hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Meg Landymore as much as I enjoyed having it. She's just awesome to talk to. And I'm happy to report that on the other side of her double scar attempt, she is a double scar finisher. The fastest time known to anyone in the world for a woman completing the double scar. That is now Meg Landymore. So, like she said, that wasn't the goal. Her whole thing was just to finish it. It was her longest run ever. It was her longest time being on her feet. Sounds like 52 hours, which to me is like unimaginable. And she was able to get and help her friend Celia, who had her longest run ever as well. They ran back across this scar together for Celia to pull it off for the first time, and for Meg to get this double done. When I reached out to Meg to have this interview, I didn't even know that was going to be a part of our conversation. So timing would have it. It ended up being a big part of the conversation, and so now we all can listen and kind of celebrate her together. And if you listen to the conversation, it's not hard to imagine how she was able to pull it off. She's just got this mentality that is strong. It is conditioned. She just believes in going after what she's after. And I don't know, she doesn't seem to have much quit in her. You can hear that she just always is competing with herself. I loved the conversation about chasing this ghost of success. Failure's always been my big demon, but listening to Meg talk about success can be equally weighing on us when we feel like we need to keep reaching the levels we've been to, when we get pushed by those levels. But I think that's sort of this spirit that carried her to this double scar. And I hope we'll have more conversations with Meg. I just think there's a lot in there to learn from her, to be inspired from her. And it was just a awesome conversation. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll come back next time and listen in. And till then, I hope you all have a great day and a great week. Get out there, get active, go discover, right? Meg talked about I just want to discover these things about myself. Where is it that I start to break? Where is it that I can start to put myself back together? And I guess that's just the process of growth. So get out there this week and grow. You all have a great day.